The last words anyone expected to hear from 17-year-old Maya Turner were, "Don't look for me." They weren't whispered during a fight. They weren't shouted in frustration or anger. They were scribbled in her delicate handwriting, on a piece of notebook paper she had carefully folded, and left on her neatly made bed, a note that would tear her family's life into pieces. When her mother, Karen, walked into her room on that late October evening, the sun already setting behind the small town of Ashbrook, she thought she would find Maya scrolling through her phone, maybe finishing up homework or packing her bag for school the next day. Instead, she found silence. The bed was made. The window was cracked open, a chilly autumn breeze pushing through the curtains. And on the pillow, as if it had been deliberately placed there for discovery, sat the note. It had just 6 words. "Don't look for me. Maya." Karen froze. At first, she thought it was a joke, one of those dark, teenage melodramas her daughter occasionally leaned into. But the more she stared, the more she realized the weight of it. There was no emoji, no heart at the end of her name, no doodles in the margins. Just a flat, chilling message. Her knees buckled, and the note shook in her hand as she screamed for her husband. That moment, that note, became the single most haunting artifact in the Turner family's history. Because in the hours that followed, and in the weeks that spiraled after, it would become terrifyingly clear, Maya Turner hadn't just run away. Something much darker was waiting beneath the surface. Quick pause here before we dive deeper. If chilling, mysterious true crime stories grip you the way they grip us, then hit that subscribe button right now, and turn on notifications, so you never miss another one of these stories. Now, back to Maya. Who was Maya Turner? Maya wasn't the kind of teenager people expected to vanish. She wasn't in constant trouble, wasn't known for skipping classes, and didn't have that cliché rebellious streak you read about in runaway cases. At 17, she was quiet, artistic, and often described as an old soul. She painted, she wrote in journals, she preferred reading mysteries to going out to parties. Her teachers admired her intelligence, though some said she seemed distracted lately. Her friends described her as kind but distant, like she was always carrying a secret. And her parents thought they knew their daughter. They thought she was safe, predictable, sheltered in their small town. But in the weeks before that note appeared, small cracks had begun to form. Karen remembered how Maya would spend hours locked in her room, her phone face down on the desk, but her eyes darting to it every few seconds. Her father, Greg, remembered hearing her sneak outside late at night, not for long, just quick walks down the street. When he asked her about it, she brushed it off, couldn't sleep. Needed air. There was also the matter of her journals. Maya had always kept them, scribbling her thoughts late into the night. But a few weeks before her disappearance, she destroyed them. Not just tossed them out, not just hid them away, she burned them. Her mother had smelled the smoke from the backyard and found her daughter tossing pages into a small fire pit. When she asked why, Maya's response was chillingly flat. "They're not for anyone to read." And then she walked away. At the time, Karen thought it was just normal teenage privacy. But after the note, that memory replayed in her head like a warning she had ignored. The day she vanished. October 22, 2021, began like any other day in Ashbrook. Maya woke up, dressed for school, ate breakfast with her parents in silence. There was nothing unusual, nothing off. She left the house wearing her black hoodie, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair tied up in a loose bun. She never came home. By the time the school day ended and Maya hadn't returned, her mother assumed she was at a friend's house. By dinner, when calls went unanswered, Karen's stomach began to churn. By 9 p.m., panic had set in. She stormed into her daughter's room, expecting to find her curled up under the covers, headphones in. Instead, she found that note. Her phone, her laptop, her wallet, gone. Everything else, left behind. The police were called within the hour. And while some officers treated it like a runaway case, teenagers leave notes all the time, one officer said, Karen and Greg knew better. This wasn't just a runaway. Their daughter wasn't the kind of girl who vanished into the night without reason. Something was wrong. The investigation begins. Detectives searched her room. They found no signs of struggle. The window wasn't forced open, the lock on the door was intact. Her closet was full, drawers untouched. The only clue, besides the note, was her laptop. She had cleared most of her browsing history, but investigators managed to recover fragments of searches. Phrases like, "How to disappear without a trace." "Signs are being followed." "Can people start over in another town?" And then, most chilling of all, "What happens if no one looks for you?" When detectives showed this to her parents, Karen broke down. Because these weren't just casual searches. They were cries for help. But the more police dug, the stranger it got. There were no texts to friends about leaving. No secret boyfriend anyone could find. No sudden fights with family. Instead, there were whispers, people in town who claimed to have seen Maya walking alone at odd hours, sometimes talking on the phone, sometimes meeting someone in a parked car. A dark sedan. No one could identify who drove it. The weight of the note. "Don't look for me." Those words became the center of everything. Did Maya mean she was in danger, warning her family that searching would put them at risk? Or was it guilt, a message from a teenager who didn't want her parents to waste their lives searching for her? The handwriting was hers. The style was hers. But the message didn't sound like Maya. She had been a worrier, the kind of girl who checked in when she was running 5 minutes late. She had never been the type to push people away, let alone her own family. The note was short, but it was devastating. And the more Karen read it, the more it felt like someone had forced her to write it. An ominous timeline. Within days, the case shifted from a simple runaway to something far more ominous. Neighbors came forward with security camera footage from the night of her disappearance. At 9:17 p.m., a figure matching Maya's description was seen walking quickly down the street. She wasn't running, but her stride looked hurried. At one point, she looked over her shoulder. Then, just beyond the edge of the camera's view, headlights appeared. The footage ended there. No one ever saw her again. The family's nightmare. For Karen and Greg, every day after the note became a waking nightmare. They plastered the town with missing posters, pleaded on social media, begged for leads. But the cruelest part wasn't the silence. It was the whispers. Some people in town whispered that Maya had simply run away, that she'd gotten tired of her quiet life and wanted something bigger. Others whispered darker theories, that maybe her parents weren't telling the full truth, that maybe home hadn't been as safe as it seemed. But the Turners knew one thing with certainty: their daughter hadn't just left. She had been taken, lured, or pushed into something she couldn't escape. And somewhere out there, she was still alive. By the end of the first week, the case was already cold. No sightings, no new evidence. Just that note, sitting in an evidence bag at the Ashbrook Police Department. But if the Turners thought the nightmare had peaked, they were wrong. Because soon, another discovery would surface, one that made Maya's chilling words echo even louder. "Don't look for me." It wasn't just a warning. It was a prophecy. The shadows that followed. The first 7 days after Maya's disappearance had stretched into eternity for the Turner family. Every hour was measured by silence, the absence of footsteps in the hallway, the absence of her voice calling from upstairs, the absence of text messages that would never come. But on the 8th day, something shifted. It was a lead. Not the kind that gave hope. The kind that made your blood run cold. A second note. Karen was in the kitchen, sipping cold coffee she had forgotten hours earlier, when her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. It contained a picture. The picture was of a folded piece of notebook paper, the same kind her daughter used. Written across it, in the same handwriting, were the words, "I told you not to look." No address. No instructions. No explanation. Just that. Karen dropped the phone. Her screen tore through the kitchen. When Greg rushed in, he saw the screen and froze. Was Maya alive? Was she being forced to write these? Or worse, had someone studied her handwriting, imitating it to play a cruel game? The police traced the number, but it was routed through encrypted servers. Untraceable. A dead end. But one thing was clear, someone out there was watching. Someone who knew the Turners hadn't listened to the warning. Backhand index pointing right before we keep unraveling this. If you want to make sure you never miss another story like this, dark, mysterious, and heartbreakingly true, go ahead and subscribe right now. That way, when the next story drops, you'll be among the first to hear it. Now, back to Maya. The dark sedan. For weeks, neighbors had whispered about a dark car seen near the Turner house at odd hours. Some dismissed it as paranoia. But 3 nights after the text message arrived, Greg proved them right. It was 1:43 a.m. when he woke to the sound of tires crunching gravel outside. He peeked through the blinds and saw it, a black sedan parked across the street, headlights off, engine humming low. He froze. His heart pounded so violently he thought the intruder would hear it. He considered grabbing a baseball bat, storming out, but something inside told him to wait. He stared. And then, the driver's side window rolled down. A man's silhouette leaned out. Not enough to see his face. Just enough to light a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his jawline. And then, as if he knew Greg was watching, the man turned his head, slowly, toward the house. Greg stumbled backward. He couldn't see the eyes, but he felt them. Cold, deliberate. A few seconds later, the car pulled away. By the time police arrived, there was nothing left. A fractured community. Ashbrook was a small town where secrets didn't last long. But Maya's disappearance was different. It didn't just fracture the Turner family, it fractured the entire community. Parents began warning their children not to walk alone. Teenagers swapped stories about the man in the car, some swearing they had seen it parked outside the school. Teachers whispered about Maya in the break room, debating whether she had run away or been taken. But perhaps the strangest development came from Maya's friends. A girl named Lila, who had been one of Maya's closest confidants, came forward with something she hadn't shared earlier. Maya told me, she thought someone was following her, Lila confessed. She didn't say who. She looked scared. Like, really scared. Police pressed her. Who was it? Why didn't she say anything sooner? Lila shook her head. She said if she told me too much, it would put me in danger. The room went silent. The journal fragment. For weeks, investigators believed Maya had destroyed all of her journals. But during a second sweep of her bedroom, they found something lodged behind her dresser, a torn page, charred along the edges as if it had narrowly escaped the fire. On it, in her messy late-night handwriting, were just 2 sentences. He's closer than they think. If they look for me, he'll know. The handwriting was hers. The fear was hers. And the chilling implication? Whoever he was, Maya had known him. A family on edge. By November, the Turner family was unraveling. Karen barely ate. Greg slept in the living room with the lights on, baseball bat by his side. Their once warm and ordinary home became a war zone of suspicion, fear, and silence. Every ring of the phone jolted them awake. Every car passing by sent them scrambling to the window. And worst of all, every night, Karen heard footsteps. Soft. Slow. Right outside Maya's bedroom door. She told herself it was her imagination. She told herself it was grief. But sometimes, the sound was accompanied by the faint scent of smoke, cigarette smoke. And when she opened the door, nothing. Just the empty hallway. The phone call. On the 30th day of Maya's disappearance, the Turner family received another message. But this time, it wasn't a text. It was a call. The phone rang at 2:06 a.m. Greg answered on the first ring. On the other end, silence. He nearly hung up when a voice finally whispered. Faint. Shaky. Barely audible. Dad? Greg's knees gave out. His throat closed. It was Maya. Maya. Maya, where are you? But before she could respond, another voice cut in. A man's voice. Low. Calm. Terrifying. We told you not to look. The line went dead. Greg screamed into the phone, begged for it to reconnect, but it was gone. Police tried tracing the call. Same problem as before. Encrypted. Impossible to track. But there was one detail that sent chills through every investigator. The call hadn't come from outside the state. It hadn't even come from outside the county. It had been made from somewhere inside Ashbrook. The spiral. From that night forward, everything shifted. The Turner family no longer felt they were searching for a missing daughter. They felt hunted. Because whoever had Maya, or claimed to, wasn't hiding in some distant city. He was right there. Among them. Watching. The note. The text. The car. The call. It all pointed to the same conclusion: someone in Ashbrook was pulling the strings. The breaking point. December arrived with snow and silence. The search was dwindling. Media coverage faded. The community grew restless. One evening, Karen sat at the dining table staring at the original note. She traced the letters with her fingertip, whispering her daughter's name like a prayer. And then something clicked. The handwriting. It was hers, but not entirely. The slant was off. The pressure of the pen was uneven. It was almost like someone had copied it. Almost. Her stomach dropped. She called Greg into the room. "Look," she whispered. "Look at the signature." And there it was. A subtle but undeniable difference. The M in Maya. Her daughter always looped it like a wave. But this M was jagged. Forced. Wrong. The note wasn't written by Maya. It was written by someone else. Someone who wanted them to believe she was gone by choice. That realization shattered everything the Turners thought they knew. If Maya hadn't written the note, then the story wasn't about a runaway at all. It wasn't about a girl who didn't want to be found. It was about a predator. Someone who had been close enough to study her handwriting. Close enough to know her family's routines. Close enough to slip into their lives without ever being caught. And worst of all, close enough to still be there. The first suspect. The moment Karen realized the note wasn't written by her daughter, the entire narrative of Maya's disappearance shifted. It was no longer about a teenager who wanted to disappear. It was about someone who wanted everyone else to believe she did. That detail, that small, jagged letter in her name, was the crack that split everything open. Because if Maya hadn't written that note, then someone had been close enough to her to forge it. Someone who knew her handwriting. Someone inside her orbit. And in a town as small as Ashbrook, that list of suspects wasn't long. The teacher. The first real suspect emerged not from the police, but from whispers. At Ashbrook High, Maya had been one of the top students in her English class, taught by a man named Daniel Cross. On the surface, Cross was respected, a sharp, middle-aged teacher who favored literature and treated his students like budding writers rather than children. But behind closed doors, rumors swirled. Maya had once told her friend Lila that Mr. Cross paid too much attention to her. That he lingered after class, offering to review her essays privately, encouraging her to write more in her journals. And then there was the unsettling detail: in the weeks before she disappeared, he had assigned an essay titled "If You Could Start Over, Where Would You Go?" When police questioned him after Maya vanished, he claimed it was just a coincidence. A creative prompt. Nothing more. But when investigators compared the handwriting on the note with old essays Maya had submitted, the similarities were haunting. Not in the content, in the corrections. Red ink. Sharp corrections. Cross's writing style had peculiar slants. And one of those slants, jagged, uneven, was identical to the M on Maya's forged note. The visit. Detectives paid Cross a visit. His house was orderly, almost too neat. Bookshelves lined with crime novels, essays stacked in folders, his typewriter gleaming on the desk. When they asked about Maya, he spoke highly of her. Too highly. She was brilliant, he said. Too brilliant for this place. I told her she was meant for bigger things. Detectives pressed harder. Did he know where she was? Had he seen her outside of school? His face twitched. Just slightly. But enough. No, he replied. I haven't seen her since the day she vanished. Poor girl. But I told her, sometimes the only way forward is to leave everything behind. That line chilled detectives. Because it sounded eerily like the note. Quick break here. If you're hooked right now and you want to hear stories like this, mysterious, chilling, and unforgettable, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Now, back to the investigation. The box. When police obtained a warrant to search his home, they expected nothing. A dead end. Maybe a strange obsession, but not evidence. What they found was worse. In the attic, buried under old textbooks, was a cardboard box. Inside, dozens of old essays from Maya. More than he should have kept. Photocopies of her artwork. And one journal. Not burned. Not destroyed. One of Maya's journals. The handwriting was unmistakable. Pages filled with her thoughts, her sketches. Some of them benign, class notes, song lyrics, scribbles. But then there were the entries that stopped investigators cold. He says I remind him of someone he lost. He watches me walk home. I feel his car behind me. He told me if I ever told anyone, I'd regret it. And the last entry, dated 2 weeks before she vanished. I think he wants me to disappear. The community divides. When word spread that Maya's journal had been found in her teacher's attic, Ashbrook erupted. Parents demanded his arrest. Students whispered horror stories. Former pupils came forward, claiming they, too, had felt his attention. But Cross denied everything. He insisted Maya had given him the journal as part of a creative mentorship. He claimed he was holding on to her work because he admired her talent. It's not what it looks like, he pleaded. But the evidence was stacking. The essays. The journal. The handwriting slant. The obsession. And yet, something didn't add up. The missing piece. If Cross had taken Maya, where was she? Why toy with her parents? Why send cryptic texts, make late-night calls, lurk in the shadows? It seemed too elaborate. Too theatrical. Then there was the phone evidence. The call that came from inside Ashbrook, it didn't trace back to Cross's house. His phone records showed nothing suspicious. Even stranger, on the night the dark sedan was spotted outside the Turner home, Cross had been seen at a faculty dinner, surrounded by witnesses. So while he looked guilty on paper, the timeline had holes. Was he the predator? Or just another pawn in something larger? Karen's nightmare. While police wrestled with the evidence, Karen's own nightmares worsened. She began seeing Maya in flashes, at the grocery store, at the bus stop, across the street. Each time, it was just a girl with similar hair, similar clothes. Each time, her heart broke anew. But one night, the vision was different. She was driving home when headlights caught someone standing at the edge of the woods. A girl. Thin, pale, hair tied in a bun. Karen slammed the brakes, tears flooding her eyes. She opened the door, screaming her daughter's name. But by the time she reached the tree line, the girl was gone. And in the dirt, illuminated by her headlights, lay something small. A lighter. Black. Cheap. On the side, scratched faintly into the plastic, was a single letter, M. Police bagged the lighter, tested it. No fingerprints. No DNA. Nothing to prove it belonged to Maya. But for Karen, it was enough to reignite the fight. She begged the community not to give up, not to let Maya fade into rumor. She started a campaign, plastering flyers with her daughter's face, holding candlelight vigils, speaking to anyone who would listen. And every time she held up the note, she said the same thing. Someone wrote this to silence us. But we won't be silent. The unraveling. The focus on Cross intensified. He was placed on leave. His name was splashed across headlines. Neighbors spit at him on the street. But as the pressure mounted, so did his anger. He called press conferences, swearing his innocence. He claimed the journal had been planted, the obsession fabricated. And then he said something no one expected. "You're looking at me," he told reporters. "But the person you should be looking at is right next to them." When asked who, he refused to answer. But detectives noticed where his eyes landed in that moment. Not at the cameras. Not at the reporters. At one of the officers standing in the crowd. The town thought they had their villain. A teacher with too much interest in his student, too much evidence piled against him. But as cracks began to show in the case, and Cross dropped that cryptic accusation, another terrifying possibility emerged. The predator wasn't who everyone thought it was. It wasn't a teacher. It wasn't a stranger. It might have been someone much closer. Someone with access not just to Maya's journals, but to the Turners themselves. The monster within. For weeks, the town of Ashbrook had rallied behind one idea, that Daniel Cross, the English teacher, was responsible for Maya's disappearance. He had the journals. He had the obsession. He had the red ink and the jagged handwriting. It was so easy to believe. Too easy. But then came his cryptic words, the warning no one wanted to hear. "You're looking at me. But the person you should be looking at is right next to them." Those words planted a seed of doubt. And in small towns, doubt spreads like wildfire. Because if Cross wasn't the monster, who was? The officer. Detective Samuel Hayes had been with the Ashbrook Police Department for nearly 15 years. To the Turner family, he had been a lifeline in the storm, the officer who checked in late at night, who assured them they weren't alone, who promised he would find their daughter. Karen trusted him. She clung to his reassurances, the way he would kneel to her level when she sobbed and whisper, "We're closer than you think." But after Cross's comment, people began looking at Hayes differently. Because Cross hadn't pointed to the reporters. He hadn't pointed to the cameras. He had looked straight at Hayes. The strange connection. When investigators revisited Hayes's involvement in the case, small oddities emerged. Hayes had been the first officer to handle the note. He was the one who carried it from Maya's room to the station. He had also been the one to recover the journal fragment behind her dresser, the page that warned, "He's closer than they think." At the time, no one questioned it. But now, people wondered, had Hayes planted it? Was he carefully curating a trail of terror, breadcrumbing the Turners into madness? And then came the cigarette smoke. Karen had confided to Hayes early on about the late-night footsteps, the faint scent of smoke outside Maya's door. Instead of writing it down in his report, Hayes had dismissed it. "Stress," he said. "Your mind playing tricks." But weeks later, Karen remembered something chilling. When Hayes came to the house for updates, he always smelled faintly of cigarettes. If you're getting chills right now, and want to follow stories just as dark and twist-filled as this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what comes next. Now, back to Maya. The Whisper campaign. Whispers spread quickly. Was Detective Hayes involved? The idea divided the town. Some refused to believe it. Hayes was respected, reliable, a pillar of the community. Others pointed to the growing list of coincidences, the way evidence always seemed to appear in his hands, the way Cross had looked at him. And then there was the car. The dark sedan. No license plate had ever been caught on camera. No neighbor had gotten close enough. But one night, a teenager claimed he had seen it parked near the high school. He remembered a sticker on the back bumper, a faded decal of the Ashbrook Police Department's charity run. And who had that sticker? Detective Hayes. The family torn apart. For the Turners, the suspicion was unbearable. Karen replayed every interaction with Hayes, her stomach churning. The nights he had lingered too long. The comfort that now felt like manipulation. Greg refused to believe it. "He's the only one who's actually helping us," he snapped. "If we turn on him, we lose everything." But Karen couldn't shake it. She began locking the doors when Hayes came by. She made excuses not to be alone in a room with him. And yet, every time she pulled back, he seemed to know. His smile grew tighter, his eyes colder. The break-in. On December 17th, nearly 2 months after Maya vanished, the Turner home was broken into. There were no smashed windows, no forced locks. Whoever entered had keys, or the skill to pick them. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But in Maya's bedroom, something new was waiting. On her bed, neatly placed, was a Polaroid photo. It showed a hand. A young girl's hand. Bruised, trembling, holding a piece of paper. On the paper, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were 4 words. "Stop before it's worse." The photo was dated 2 days earlier. The police in turmoil. When the Turners handed the photo over, the department erupted. Half the officers demanded Cross's immediate arrest. The other half whispered that Hayes needed to be investigated. But leadership hesitated. How could they accuse one of their own without proof? Meanwhile, the Turners were trapped in a nightmare. Their daughter was alive, or at least, had been 2 days earlier. But every clue only deepened the sense that the predator wasn't a stranger. It was someone inside the investigation itself. The revelation. One night, exhausted and desperate, Karen sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the photo. Her eyes kept drifting to the date scribbled in the corner. 2 days earlier. Something nagged at her. That same night, Hayes had come over. He had stayed later than usual, sipping coffee, reassuring her that they were so close to answers. And when he left, she remembered seeing a faint smudge on his wrist. Ink. Black ink. The same smudging left on the note in the photo. Her stomach dropped. The confrontation. The next day, Karen confronted him. She didn't accuse him outright, she couldn't. But she asked about the break-in, about the Polaroid, about the ink. Hayes's smile didn't falter. Instead, he leaned in closer. Too close. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You should stop asking questions, Karen. For your own good." Her blood froze. Because it wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. The trap. Terrified, Karen told Greg. At first, he refused to believe it. But eventually, he agreed to help set a trap. The next time Hayes visited, Karen casually mentioned that they had installed a new security system, cameras hidden around the house, motion sensors on the windows. It was a lie. But it worked. That night, long after they had gone to bed, Karen heard the footsteps again. Slow. Heavy. Stopping outside Maya's room. She held her breath, clutching Greg's hand. The sound of the door creaking open. And then, silence. When Greg leapt from the bed and stormed down the hall, the bedroom was empty. But on Maya's pillow was something new. Another note. This one said, "You're making him angry." And scribbled below, in a shaky scrawl that was unmistakably Maya's. "Help me." By now, the Turners knew 2 things for certain. Maya was alive. And someone close, someone inside the very system meant to protect them, was playing a cruel, escalating game. The teacher was no longer the biggest threat. The real monster was in uniform. And if they didn't figure out who to trust, they would lose Maya forever. Into the darkness. The Turner family was no longer just grieving, they were terrified. The notes. The Polaroid. The late-night footsteps. It was no longer about finding Maya. It was about survival. Because someone close, someone trusted, was taunting them. Hunting them. In the police department, the very people meant to protect them, might have been compromised. So, for the first time since Maya vanished, Karen and Greg decided they couldn't just wait for answers. They had to go looking for the truth themselves. The breaking point. Karen barely slept. Every sound outside the house made her flinch. Every time the phone rang, her chest tightened. Greg tried to be the strong one, but he was cracking too. The night he chased the phantom footsteps down the hall, only to find another note waiting, something in him snapped. "We can't keep living like this," he said, gripping Karen's shoulders. "We're waiting to die. Or worse, waiting for her to die." Karen's tears fell freely. "Then what do we do?" Greg's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "We fight back. The secret search." The Turners couldn't trust the police. Not after Cross's warning. Not after Hayes' threats. So they turned to someone outside the system. Karen's brother, Michael, was a private investigator in a neighboring county. He'd handled cases of fraud, missing persons, and cheating spouses, but nothing like this. When Karen called him, he didn't hesitate. "I'll be there tonight," he said. Michael arrived with a duffel bag filled with cameras, audio recorders, and a determination that chilled Karen. "This isn't just about finding Maya anymore," he said. "It's about exposing whoever's doing this. And if it's who I think it is, you need to be ready for what comes next." The discovery in the woods. Michael started by retracing Maya's last known steps. The alley where she was last seen. The bridge where her backpack was found. The woods at the edge of town where kids whispered about strange cars parked late at night. One cold evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, Michael found something. Half buried beneath leaves, there was a box. Inside were photographs. Dozens of Polaroids. Some showed Maya, pale and terrified, her eyes swollen from crying. Others showed parts of her room, her desk, her posters, her bed. But the most chilling ones were dated weeks before she vanished. Someone had been watching her. Someone had been inside her room. 4 months. Backhand index pointing right. If this story is gripping you, and you can't believe how dark it's getting, hit that subscribe button. These are the stories we uncover every single day, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to Maya. The carved initials. Among the photos was one detail Michael couldn't ignore. In several shots of Maya's room, the corner of a dresser was visible. Scratched into the wood were 2 faint letters. S.H. Samuel Hayes. The detective. It was no longer just suspicion. It was evidence. The betrayal. Karen wanted to storm into the police department and shove the photos in their faces. But Michael stopped her. "If you confront him without backup, he'll bury you. He has the badge, the connections, the authority. You need to be smart. We need to catch him in the act." Greg reluctantly agreed. So they waited. They watched. And every night, the footsteps came back. The trap tightens. Michael wired the house with hidden cameras. Tiny lenses tucked into vents, disguised in picture frames, hidden in stuffed animals in Maya's room. For 3 nights, nothing happened. And then, on the 4th night, just after 2 a.m., the cameras caught movement. A shadow slipping in through the back door. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, as though he had done this before. He walked straight to Maya's room. And when the camera caught his face, Karen nearly collapsed. It wasn't Samuel Hayes. It was Officer Daniel Price, a younger cop, quiet, always in Hayes' shadow. The man no one ever noticed. The man everyone forgot was there. The horrifying realization. Price moved with precision, pulling something from his jacket pocket. Another Polaroid. He placed it gently on Maya's bed, adjusted the blankets, and lingered, his hand brushing the wall as though he was touching her ghost. Karen's heart shattered. All this time, she had been terrified of Hayes. But Hayes wasn't the one in her house. Price was. And worse, the initials on Maya's dresser weren't SH at all. They were DP, carved so faintly that under the wrong light, they looked like SH. The Turners had been chasing the wrong monster. The note that changed everything. The next morning, Michael retrieved the footage. As he showed it to Karen and Greg, their hands shook. Price. The quiet one. The overlooked one. The wolf hiding in plain sight. But there was something else in the footage. Something they hadn't noticed at first. When Price placed the Polaroid on the bed, the camera caught a glimpse of what it said. It wasn't just another warning. It was a map. A crude, hand-drawn sketch of a cabin in the woods. And beneath it, 3 words. She's waiting here. The decision. Greg wanted to call the police immediately. But Michael shook his head. Think about it. Who do you think will get that call? Hayes. And who's Price's partner? Hayes. If they're working together, we lose her. This is our only chance. Karen's voice was trembling, but steady. Then we go tonight. Into the woods. The cabin was deep in the forest, miles from the main road. The Turners followed Michael's car, their headlights off, their breaths ragged with fear. When they finally saw it, a small, rotting structure hidden behind pines, Karen nearly screamed. Because there, in the window, was a flicker of light. Someone was inside. The descent. Michael went first, moving like a hunter, his flashlight covered to dim the beam. Greg followed, gripping a crowbar. Karen trailed behind, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold her phone. The front door creaked as Michael pushed it open. The smell hit them first, damp wood, mildew, and something else. Something metallic. Blood. The cabin was small. 1 room. A mattress in the corner, stained. Chains bolted to the floor. And on the wall, hundreds of Polaroids. Every one of Maya. Different stages of fear. Different stages of pain. Karen's knees buckled. And then she saw it. In the corner of the room, curled up on the floor, her wrists raw, her face pale but alive. Maya. The rescue. Karen screamed her daughter's name and ran to her. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Mom? Her voice was barely a whisper. But before Karen could reach her, a figure stepped from the shadows. Officer Price. His face was blank. Empty. You shouldn't have come here, he said softly. And behind him, another figure emerged. Detective Samuel Hayes. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. It wasn't just one monster. It was 2. Partners in the investigation. Partners in the hunt. And together, they had been orchestrating the nightmare all along. Maya was alive. But the Turner family had just walked straight into the jaws of the predators who took her. The confrontation. The cabin was silent except for the sound of Maya's ragged breathing. Karen knelt beside her daughter, cradling her face, whispering through tears. But behind her, the floor creaked. Price stepped forward, his gun gleaming in the pale light. Hayes flanked him, his eyes cold, his smirk mocking. And for the first time, Karen realized the horrifying truth. These men weren't just kidnappers. They weren't just predators. They were predators wearing the uniforms of trust. Hayes speaks. Hayes's voice filled the cabin, smooth and deliberate. You were supposed to listen, Karen. She told you not to look for her. That was the only rule. And you broke it. Greg's fists clenched, the crowbar shaking in his grip. You're sick, he spat. Hayes chuckled. No. I'm careful. I've been doing this a long time. And do you know why no one ever suspects me? He tapped his badge. Because people like you still believe this means something. The divide. Price's expression was different. He wasn't smiling. His jaw was tight, his hands trembling as he kept the gun raised. Karen noticed. He wasn't like Hayes. Not completely. There was hesitation in his eyes. And Karen seized it. Daniel, she whispered, her voice soft but cutting through the tension. You don't have to do this. Please. Look at her. She's a child. Price flinched. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second. But Hayes's gaze snapped to him. "Don't you dare," Hayes snarled. "We're in this together. You know what happens if you walk away now." The battle begins. Michael moved first. In one swift motion, he swung his flashlight into Hayes's face. The detective stumbled, roaring in pain. Price fired, but the bullet buried itself in the wall, missing Karen by inches. Chaos exploded. Greg lunged at Price with the crowbar, the two men crashing into the table, splintering wood. Karen dragged Maya toward the door, sobbing, her heart pounding. Hayes recovered quickly, blood streaming from his nose. He grabbed Michael and slammed him against the wall, pinning him by the throat. "You think you're a hero?" Hayes growled. "You're nothing." The desperate struggle. Greg and Price rolled across the floor, the gun sliding out of reach. Greg landed a blow to Price's jaw, but Price was stronger, fueled by panic. He pinned Greg down, his hands tightening around his throat. Karen screamed, grabbing the gun from the floor. She aimed it, hands trembling, her finger hovering over the trigger. But before she could fire, Hayes shoved Michael into her, sending her sprawling. The gun clattered away again. The room was a storm of screams, fists, and breaking wood. And through it all, Maya whimpered, clutching her knees, too weak to move. If this moment has you on the edge of your seat, if your heart is racing, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. These are the stories we tell every single day, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. Now, back to the cabin. The weak link. Price's grip tightened on Greg's throat, his face twisted with rage, but his eyes were glassy, conflicted. "Stop," Greg choked out. "This isn't you." Something flickered in Price. A memory. A ghost. And suddenly, his hands loosened. Greg shoved him off, gasping for air. Price staggered back, shaking, as if fighting with himself. Hayes roared in fury. "You pathetic coward." The turning point. Hayes lunged for the fallen gun, but Michael was faster. He dove, seizing it, spinning around with the barrel aimed squarely at the detective. "Don't move," Michael growled, his voice hoarse. Hayes froze, but his smirk returned. "You don't have the guts." And then he moved. Michael fired. The sound was deafening in the small cabin. Hayes fell back, blood blossoming across his chest. But even as he collapsed, his laughter echoed. "You'll never be free." And then he went still. The collapse. The room went silent, save for Maya's sobs. Karen pulled her daughter into her arms, rocking her, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Greg staggered to his feet, his face bruised, his throat raw. Michael lowered the gun, his hands shaking uncontrollably. But Price was still there. He stood in the corner, staring at Hayes's body, his chest rising and falling like a man waking from a nightmare. Finally, his gun clattered to the floor. "I didn't want this," he whispered. "I never wanted this." The escape. Michael kept the gun trained on Price as they gathered Maya. The cabin felt like it was closing in on them, the weight of the horrors pinned to the walls pressing down. When they finally stepped into the night air, the forest seemed alive, every shadow a threat, every rustle of leaves a warning. Karen carried Maya in her arms, whispering, "It's over, baby. It's over." But Maya's eyes, wide, hollow, haunted, told a different story. It wasn't over. Not for her. Not ever. The road back. They drove in silence, the headlights cutting through the trees. Michael's knuckles were white on the wheel. Greg's hand never left Karen's shoulder. And Maya. Maya stared out the window, clutching the blanket Karen had wrapped around her, as if it were the only thing tethering her to the world. No one spoke. Because deep down, they all knew the same truth. They had survived. But survival came at a price. The final twist of the act. Hours later, at the hospital, as doctors worked on Maya's injuries, a nurse handed Karen an evidence bag. It had been found in Maya's pocket. A folded piece of paper. Karen's hands shook as she opened it. It was another note, written in Maya's handwriting. But these words were different. He wasn't the only one. Don't stop looking. Karen's heart dropped. Because that meant the nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The Turner family had faced the monsters in the cabin. They had fought. They had survived. But Hayes's dying words, Price's broken confession, and Maya's final note all pointed to one devastating reality. There were more. And whoever they were still out there. Watching. Waiting. The aftermath. The Turner family thought the nightmare ended in the cabin. Hayes was dead. Price was in custody. Maya was home. But the truth was far darker. Because sometimes, the real horror doesn't end when you escape. It follows you. It waits. It lingers in the shadows of your mind, and in the places no one dares to look. The hospital. Maya lay in a sterile white bed, her wrists wrapped in bandages, her body weak, her face pale. Doctors whispered words like trauma, malnutrition, dehydration. But Karen knew the physical wounds were only the surface. The real scars were buried deep inside her daughter. Every time a door creaked open, Maya flinched. Every time a man's voice echoed down the hall, her breathing quickened. And at night, when she finally fell asleep, she woke screaming. She was alive. But she was not safe. The interrogation. Price sat in a holding cell, his hands cuffed, his face blank. The FBI had stepped in now, their questions rapid, their patience razor thin. Price admitted to being part of it, admitted to watching, to helping Hayes. But he swore there were others. He swore Hayes wasn't the leader. He was just the gatekeeper, Price muttered. There's someone else. Someone higher. The agents pressed him, but he gave no names. Only one chilling phrase. They'll come for her again. The town's reaction. When news broke, the town of Millfield convulsed. 2 police officers, men sworn to protect, exposed as predators. Parents pulled their children close. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion. And the Turners became the center of it all. Reporters camped outside their house. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved into their faces. How did you know? What did they want with her? Do you think more children are in danger? Karen answered none of them. Because the truth was, she didn't know. And that was the most terrifying part. Maya's silence. Weeks passed. The bruises faded. The bandages came off. But Maya barely spoke. She sat for hours staring at the window, her lips trembling, her eyes unfocused. When Karen begged her to talk, Maya would whisper only fragments. The woods, the chains, the pictures. And always the same ending. They weren't alone. Karen would hold her close, whispering promises. But inside, she was breaking. Because promises meant nothing when the enemy was faceless, nameless, everywhere. Backhand index pointing right. If this story has you gripped, if you can feel the weight of what this family endured, hit that subscribe button right now. These are the kinds of dark, unbelievable true stories we uncover every single day, and trust me, the ending of this one will stay with you forever. Now, back to Maya. The funeral. Detective Samuel Hayes was buried quietly, with no honors, no procession. Only a few men in suits stood by his grave, their faces hidden behind dark sunglasses. Michael noticed them. They weren't family. They weren't colleagues. And when the service ended, they didn't linger. They simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the black cars that carried them. Michael's gut twisted. These weren't mourners. They were watchers. The note. One rainy night, Karen found Maya sitting at her desk, scribbling furiously on a piece of paper. When Karen gently touched her shoulder, Maya startled, covering the note with her hand. "Sweetheart," Karen whispered, "what is it?" Slowly, Maya slid the paper across the desk. Her handwriting was shaky, uneven. It said, Don't let them find me again. Beneath it, she had drawn the same crude sketch of the cabin. But this time, there was another symbol beside it. A circle. With 3 vertical lines inside. Michael froze when he saw it. Because 2 weeks earlier, while investigating Hayes' belongings, he had found the same symbol carved into the underside of a desk at the police station. This wasn't just about Hayes and Price. This was bigger. Much bigger. The warning. Late one night, as Michael left the Turner house, he noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under his windshield wiper. His pulse raced as he opened it. The message was short, typed in black ink. You should have left her where she belongs. Michael scanned the street, but it was empty. No cars. No footsteps. No sound. Just silence. The kind that means you're not alone. The family fractures. Greg threw himself into protecting the house. He installed cameras, locks, alarms. Karen never left Maya's side, sleeping on the floor beside her bed, listening for the slightest noise. Michael dug deeper, pulling files, calling contacts, chasing whispers about secret societies, trafficking rings, officers gone missing. But the weight crushed them. Greg and Karen argued. Michael grew paranoid. And Maya withdrew further. Until one morning, she was gone. The vanishing. Karen woke to find Maya's bed empty, the window open. On the desk, another note. The same handwriting. The same 4 words. Don't look for me. The search again. Panic consumed the Turner house. Greg tore through the neighborhood, screaming her name. Karen collapsed in the yard, clutching the note to her chest, wailing. Michael scoured the woods, the bridge, the alley. But Maya was nowhere. She had vanished. Just like before. The haunting truth. The police launched another investigation. The FBI got involved again. But this time, the Turners felt different. Hopeless. Because they realized something Maya had known all along. You can't run from shadows you can't see. You can't fight enemies you can't name. And you can't protect a child who no longer believes she can be saved. The final reflection. Months later, Karen sat alone in Maya's room, the walls still lined with her posters, her books still stacked neatly. On the desk lay the last note. Don't look for me. Karen traced the letters with trembling fingers, tears dripping onto the page. And in that moment, she finally understood. Maya hadn't left because she wanted to. She left because she believed staying meant death. And maybe she was right. The story of Maya Turner is one of survival, but not victory. It's a reminder that sometimes, the monsters aren't strangers in the dark. Sometimes, they're the ones sworn to protect you. Sometimes, they live in the shadows of your town, your home, your mind. And sometimes, when someone tells you don't look for me, it isn't a plea. It's a warning.